The grocery bags bit into my fingers as I pushed open the front door of our house in Cedar Ridge, a town that's small enough to feel suffocating and quiet enough to make every argument echo longer than it should. I had just wrapped a 10-hour shift at the architecture firm, my third in a row, skipped lunch again, and still stopped by the co-op for oat milk, turmeric, and that overpriced brand of granola my mother insisted on. The one that only came in resealable brown paper bags with hand-drawn birds on the label. Inside, the house smelled like reheated soup and bleach. Kitchen light buzzed faintly above the stove. Nobody looked up when I walked in. My boots squeaked on the freshly mopped tiles, mopped by me last night. I set the bags gently on the counter, careful not to crush the avocado she had also texted me about. My shoulders slumped forward as I exhaled. "You get my message?" Dad's voice cut through the quiet like a knife sliding through fabric. I turned slightly. "Which one?" He stepped into the kitchen, arms crossed, wearing that expression he used when delivering ultimatums he thought were perfectly reasonable. "Your mom and I have been talking. We've decided that if you're not going to contribute more, financially, maybe it's time you think about living somewhere else." I froze for a second, trying to decide if I had actually heard him correctly. "Contribute more?" He nodded, lips pressed tight. "You've got your job, your health, your own money coming in. Meanwhile, I'm retired, your mom's got her doctor appointments every week, and Corey's still finding his footing. This house is underwater, Alina. We're trying to stay afloat. I pay for the internet, most of the groceries, the gas bill, and half the electric. I already do contribute. Do you know what the mortgage is?" "No, you don't," he snapped. "I've been covering it. Because you insisted on paying it yourself. Because this is my house," he barked. From the living room, Corey's voice floated in, casual and indifferent. "She acts like we'd fall apart without her or something." I clenched my teeth. My hand tightened around one of the brown bags until I heard the paper begin to tear. I let go and looked down. The receipt in my coat pocket pressed cold against my thigh. $21.72, every cent spent on their requests. Nothing for me. "I'm not acting like anything," I said, keeping my voice low. "I've been helping since I was 16. Dad scoffed. "Oh, please, don't get dramatic." Then Mom appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a towel, her posture stiff and closed off. "We just want everyone to do their part, honey. I've been doing more than my part." "Then why does it always feel like you're holding something back?" she asked. It was her tone that did it, the way she said it like a disappointed teacher, not a mother. Something deep in my chest curled in on itself like paper meeting flame. I opened my mouth, then closed it. There was no use explaining anymore. Without another word, I let go of the grocery bags. They dropped onto the counter with a soft thud. I walked to the front door, feeling the weight of the keys in my pocket but unsure if I even needed them anymore. I opened the door, felt the cool air hit my face, and before stepping out, I turned slightly. "If anyone asks," I said, voice steady but quiet, "this house no longer has a daughter named Alina." I closed the door behind me. I was raised to believe that being useful was the same as being loved. If I came through when things got hard, if I paid the bills when they didn't ask, if I said yes before they finished the question, then I belonged. Then I mattered. The first time I helped was when I was 16. Mom had miscalculated the utilities again, and the power company had left a notice on our door. I used my part-time wages from the cafe to cover the electric. She hugged me tight and whispered, "You're such a good girl. Always taking care of us." It was supposed to be temporary. A little help until things got better. But it never stopped. I never stopped. By 25, I was paying for groceries, Wi-Fi, and Corey's therapy sessions. By 28, I was sending money for their car repairs, covering overdraft fees on Dad's old account, and occasionally dropping off prescriptions that Mom forgot to refill. I never said anything. Never asked for thanks. 'Cause I thought love worked that way. I thought if I did enough, I'd be seen. Not just noticed, but seen, as someone who mattered not for what she gave, but for who she was. But the longer I stayed, the more invisible I felt. I didn't go far that night, just to a friend's spare room across town. Lena, a college roommate turned kind of roommate again, had a place with too many plants and not enough chairs. She barely asked questions, just handed me a folded blanket and a toothbrush still sealed in plastic. We sat in silence for a while. Kind that isn't awkward but safe. I slept better on her lumpy futon than I had in years. The next morning I woke up early. My body was used to the schedule, used to giving itself up before the day even began. I brushed my teeth, sat on the balcony with a mug of tea and looked out at the city below. I hadn't cried. Not yet. There was an odd relief in that. That afternoon I went home, not to stay, just to pack. No one was there. The house was quiet, lived in but cold. The kind of quiet where the furniture carries memory like a bruise. I moved through the rooms quickly, grabbing only what I needed. 2 suitcases, a box of books, my favorite sweater, the notebook with my sketches from college, and the ceramic mug I'd bought on a trip I took alone to Asheville. It had a chip on the rim, but it was mine. Before I left, I sat at the desk in my childhood room, still covered with a dusty high school trophy and a corkboard filled with other people's dreams, and opened my laptop. I created a spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, expense type. Column C, amount. Column D, who it was for. I scrolled through emails, PayPal receipts, Venmo logs, and bank statements. The numbers added up fast, too fast. I didn't realize how much had left my account until it stared back at me in black and white. $18,402.17. $18,400 in less than 10 months. Gas bills. Groceries. Corey's therapy copays. Plumber they never paid. The overdraft fees I covered twice because the check hadn't cleared. The phone bill that mysteriously got routed to me 1 month and never left. I didn't cry then either. I just kept typing. I printed the sheet and folded it carefully into an envelope I labeled, "For reference only." I left it on my nightstand. Not to prove anything to them. I didn't expect apologies or repayments. I just needed proof for myself that I wasn't imagining it, that the exhaustion was earned. In the weeks that followed, I settled into the small 1-bedroom apartment Lena found me on the west side of town. It wasn't glamorous, white walls, secondhand furniture, and a kitchen light that flickered every 3rd day, but it was quiet. Mine. I paid the first month's rent from my savings. The second with a freelance project I picked up over the weekend. I bought my own groceries, filled my fridge with things I liked: blueberries, chickpeas, fresh herbs, ice cream with real vanilla beans instead of flavored swirl. No one texted me to ask if I could grab something on my way home. No one expected a Zelle notification by Friday evening. No one asked how much I had left after rent. I had space. And in that space I found something I didn't know I had lost: the ability to breathe without bracing. They didn't stop contacting me, though. First message came from Mom. "Hope you're okay. We're trying to respect your space, but the water bill came and it's higher than usual. Just FYI. Then Dad. Call your mother. Then Corey. The sink's leaking again. I don't have the number for that plumber. Can you text it?" I didn't block them. I just muted everything. I let the silence grow between us, let it stretch into something unfamiliar, something mine. Became a kind of quiet language, a boundary built one ignored notification at a time. Instead of answering them, I answered myself. I bought a new notebook. Started journaling again. Took walks without checking the time. Brewed tea without reheating it 3 times because someone needed a ride or groceries or help. I made dinner for one. Simple, nourishing. Real food. I replaced the cracked shower curtain I'd been using for years with one that had little gold constellations on it. Made the bathroom feel like a planetarium. Made it feel mine. I didn't need a parade. I just needed peace. And for the first time in years, I wasn't apologizing for it. It had been just over 3 weeks since I walked out of my parents' house, since I dropped the granola on the counter and reclaimed my name as my own. 3 weeks of muted calls, of unopened texts sitting quietly in the background of my phone like ghosts waiting to be fed. On a calm Wednesday morning, just as I reached the front steps of the firm, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I already knew who it was before I checked. Dad, why didn't the card go through? No greeting. No punctuation. Just 7 words, flat and sharp like a nail in the heel of a shoe. Words that assumed I had missed a shift, as if this were a job I had signed up for. I didn't answer. I placed my phone face down on my desk and poured myself a mug of coffee from the break room pot. No one in the office knew anything had changed. To them, I was still the same Alina, organized, punctual, the one who stayed late and brought cookies on Fridays. And maybe I was. Maybe the change was so quiet it only hummed underneath my skin. By noon, Corey was calling. Once. Twice. A third time. I let it ring. The 4th time, I answered. Not because I wanted to, but because a part of me needed to hear how far they'd go to pull me back in. You knew we needed that money, he snapped before I could say a word. You think you can just stop helping and nothing changes? You think you're better than us now because you've got a little apartment and some spreadsheet? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. You used to be the only reliable one, he added, voice laced with bitterness. Now you're just gone. Then he hung up. No goodbye. Just a click like closing a tab. That night, I sat in my apartment, legs folded under me on the living room rug, laptop balanced on my knees. I opened the county property portal, the one that lists mortgages, liens, and public notices. I typed in the address of the house I had once called home. There it was. Pre-foreclosure. Final notice issued. I read it twice. Then again. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I didn't feel panic or guilt, only a stillness I couldn't explain. I had been sending $1,300 a month for nearly a year, sometimes more. I'd done it on faith, on duty, without asking for a single invoice or explanation. I thought I was patching a crack. I thought I was holding back the collapse. Now I realized the money never went to the bank. It went somewhere else. Corey's car, maybe. Or Dad's dental work. Or the new vacuum that Mom said they desperately needed but never used. I closed the tab. I didn't need every detail. I had enough truth to hold on to. They hadn't needed a daughter. They had needed a fallback plan. And that plan had finally walked away. The next day, I sat by the small table in my kitchen and stared out the window. I poured myself a glass of water, watched the light pass through it and dance on the table's surface. There was no music. No voices. No footsteps above or below. Just me. A single breath. Clean room. I was no longer the person they could silently invoice. No longer the one to call when things went wrong. No longer the net. And I didn't feel guilty about it. I fell awake. I let my fingers trace the edge of the glass. It was cool. Clear. Till. For the first time in my adult life, I was withholding nothing from them or myself. Just living. The call came on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks and 6 days since I left. Sundays at my parents' house had always followed a ritual. Dad watching reruns of old football games, Mom folding laundry while flipping between shopping channels, Corey pacing through the house under the illusion of job hunting. It was the perfect time to call. They'd all be home. I wanted them to hear me. All of them. At once. I hadn't rehearsed the speech, but I had carried it in my chest for years. It had taken shape slowly, like sediment hardening into stone. A weight I'd mistaken for duty. I dialed the house line. It rang twice. Hello? Mom's voice was soft, cautious, like she didn't know which version of me might answer back. Put me on speaker, I said. A pause. Then the faint beep. In the background, I could hear the metallic crack of a soda can, the shuffle of someone moving a chair. Then Dad, I'm here. Corey mumbled, same. I didn't hesitate. Where did the money go? Silence. I imagined them exchanging glances, searching for someone else to speak first. What money? Mom finally asked, her voice floating upward like she was already preparing for denial. I sent over $1,300 every month. For nearly a year. I checked the mortgage records this week. It's in foreclosure. So again, I'm asking, where did the money go? Mom cleared her throat. Your father had dental work. And then the water heater broke. Corey's car needed repairs and groceries have been overwhelming, I finished for her. Corey's voice cut in. It's not like we took vacations or anything. Tough came up. But we were gonna fix it. Dad added, it's not like we meant to deceive you. We thought we were managing. Things just got ahead of us. I let their words hang in the air, hollow and practiced. You never showed me a bill, I said. You never asked if I could afford it. You just assumed I'd cover it. The line went quiet. Alina, Mom began, using the soft tone she saved for manipulation. We're family. We shouldn't need contracts. I nodded to myself, even though they couldn't see it. Exactly. There was no contract. No deed in my name. No seat at the table unless I paid for it. Till silence. I've read the emails. Texts. I've heard the voicemails where you called me selfish, cold, dramatic. But the truth is, I was your daughter. You turned me into your donor. Dad exhaled heavily. You don't understand. Without you, we're losing everything. I looked out the window at the little tree outside my apartment, its leaves trembling but still upright. Still breathing. No, I said softly. You lost everything the moment you saw me as a balance sheet. And then I pressed end call. I didn't do it out of anger. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. It was closure, not rage. A door quietly clicking shut after years of being left ajar. I stared at the phone screen for a moment, not expecting it to ring again, and it didn't. Not right away. They were probably stunned. Not by the foreclosure or the confrontation, but by the fact that I'd stopped playing my role. I reached for the unopened envelope sitting on my kitchen counter. The one I had ignored for 2 days, sent from their address to mine. It was thin. Lighter than it should have been. Inside was a single folded sheet. Final notice. Delinquent. Default. Eviction proceedings. My name wasn't anywhere on the deed. But somehow the letter had still found its way to me. They wanted me to see it. Wanted me to feel it. That old guilt, the one they fed like a houseplant, watered with phrases like you're our rock, we need you, we'd be lost without you. But this time there was no guilt. No ache. Just truth. I folded the letter slowly, once, then again, and tore it in half. Not out of hatred. Out of release. It was never mine to carry. And now I didn't have to. I opened the group chat the next morning. It had been untouched since my departure, like a dusty shelf filled with mismatched mugs no one wanted to throw away. The last few messages were exactly as I remembered. Grocery lists from Mom, clipped reminders from Dad, Corey's passive-aggressive emojis when I didn't send money fast enough. There were old photos too, birthdays I paid for, family dinners I cooked, a blurry picture of Corey holding the cake I bought him, grinning like it was all his effort. None of the captions ever mentioned me. I was always behind the camera, behind the scenes, behind the payments. I scrolled until my thumbs started to hurt. Then I stopped. And I typed one line. I'm not your backup plan anymore. Goodbye. I hit send. Then I left the group. Blocked them all. Mom. Dad. Corey. My phone went still. Not silent. Till. Silence waits. Stillness accepts. I let that settle in my chest like breath finally reaching the bottom of my lungs. Later that day, I sat at the tiny wooden desk in my bedroom. The spreadsheet was still pinned to the wall, but I no longer needed to look at it. I knew the numbers by heart, not because they haunted me, but because they grounded me. That sheet wasn't about the money. It was about the math of being taken for granted. Till I didn't open it. Instead, I opened a banking app, the other one. The one I had created a few months back but never touched. I had named the account Alina's Space, not really knowing what I was saving for. It had no linked payments. No withdrawals. Just quiet deposits, $50 here, $30 there, each one a small promise to myself. For the first time, I moved real money into it. What I would have sent them this month and the next. I closed the app. And smiled. I went for a walk that evening, the kind of long, slow walk where your thoughts settle instead of spin. I passed by the corner boutique I had always avoided. The displays were too pretty, too curated, too indulgent. A part of me always felt like I didn't belong in places like that. But this time I went inside. There, on the second shelf from the door, was a pair of soft leather shoes. Simple, beautiful, perfectly my size. I tried them on. They fit like they were waiting for me. No second thoughts. No silent calculator running in my head. I bought them. In full. No discount, no guilt. And when I stepped out of the boutique, I didn't feel like someone escaping anything. I felt like someone returning to themselves. Back home, I made dinner just for me, spaghetti with fresh basil, real garlic, and a splash of cream. I lit a candle I'd been saving since last Christmas. The one I thought I'd burn during some special family occasion. The flame flickered steadily, casting a soft light across my kitchen like a quiet celebration. No one barged in. No one interrupted. No one needed anything. And in that stillness, I felt something new take root. Not defiance. Not revenge. Just peace. The shoes sat neatly by the door, untouched since I bought them, but every time I walked past, I smiled. Not because they were expensive or beautiful, but because they were mine. Paid for in full. No strings. No expectations. No guilt. I had hosted people once or twice since moving into my apartment, small, casual gatherings. A few coworkers. Lena. Her friend Gerald, who always brought too much dip and insisted his chili recipe was unbeatable. Last Saturday, I hosted a potluck. Nothing extravagant. Just warmth. The dining table was tiny, meant for two at best, but somehow held everything. A pot of lentils, a spinach dip that Nora made from scratch, cornbread wrapped in foil and still warm, and in the center, my lemon bars stacked modestly on a chipped plate. I hadn't hosted anything in years. Not because I couldn't, but because it had never occurred to me that people might show up without expecting me to hold everything up. They came with full hands and open laughter. They stayed late. No one asked what I could do for them. They just enjoyed being there. We sat cross-legged on the floor, plates balanced on knees and napkins. Couch was too small, the light too soft, the playlist accidentally left on shuffle. And still, it was perfect. At one point, someone asked, "Hey, you never talk about your family. You close with them?" The room went quiet, not awkward, just curious. I paused, then took a sip of wine. "Some stories are better closed," I said. No one pushed. They nodded. And we kept eating. Later that night, after the dishes were rinsed and the laughter had faded into the soft hum of my apartment, I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window. The rosemary in the little box beside me had finally sprouted. I ran my fingers gently across its leaves. They were small but strong. Delicate but sure. I had started planting things this spring, not just herbs. Habits. Boundaries. Dreams. Every Saturday, I went to the farmer's market. Every Wednesday, I took yoga. Some mornings I walked without checking my phone, just letting the breeze hit my skin and remind me that I was here, that I was breathing. And in the quiet spaces between everything, I made lists. Books I wanted to read. Recipes I wanted to try. Places I wanted to go. The top of that list, Maine. I didn't know a single soul there. And that was the point. It sounded like a place where the silence was scenic, not loaded. The money I once wired to save someone else's house was now quietly building a future that belonged only to me. A solo trip. A new coat for winter. A better mattress, one that didn't remember all the nights I cried into it. Things that didn't need justification. Things that didn't come with someone else's invoice attached. I used to think home meant bloodlines, shared bills, shared walls. Now I knew better. Home was where I didn't flinch when the phone buzzed. Home was in the rosemary on my sill. In the lemon bar recipe Nora texted me about the next morning. In the steady hum of a ceiling fan that wasn't spinning over the weight of old debt. It was in the stillness after people leave and nothing feels broken. It was here. In me. The morning after the potluck, I stood at my tiny kitchen counter, barefoot and quiet, flipping through the pages of a travel magazine I'd picked up weeks ago from the free bin at the library. The centerfold was a 2-page spread of Maine in autumn, red-orange leaves like fire licking the edges of winding trails and blue coastlines. Didn't shout luxury. It whispered solitude. There was a place called Rockport with a bed and breakfast run by an old couple who made fresh scones every morning. Another town, Camden, had hiking trails that led straight to the sea. Every description felt like a map to the person I was becoming. Someone who didn't ask for permission to rest. I opened my laptop. Typed flights to Maine. It wasn't a plan yet. Just a possibility. But something about it felt bold. Sacred. Like a promise whispered to yourself when no one's around to doubt it. I sipped my coffee and opened my bank app, the one I called Alina's Space. The savings I'd once funneled into someone else's survival had grown quietly. Not huge, but steady. Enough for a trip. Enough to start imagining a life that wasn't built around emergencies. For the first time, I didn't feel like checking that balance was tied to someone else's needs. It was mine. All mine. By noon, I had bookmarked 2 inns, 1 trail, and a tiny seafood place with picnic benches that overlooked the ocean. I could already imagine sitting there alone, a plate of crab cakes in front of me, and nothing on my phone except a soft jazz playlist and a note to buy postcards. Later that day, I passed by a boutique bookstore on my walk. It had a faded green awning and a dusty shelf of local picks in the window. I stepped in without hesitation. The place smelled like old paper and cinnamon oil. Picked out 2 novels, both paperbacks. One about a woman who moves to a cottage in the woods after her divorce. The other, a quiet memoir about starting over after burning out in corporate law. The woman at the counter smiled at me as I paid in cash. "You visiting or local?" "Local," I said. "But I'm planning a trip soon." She nodded. "Anywhere good?" "Maine." Her smile deepened. "Good choice. The air there forgives you." I didn't know what that meant, but I felt it. That night, I lit the rosemary candle again and opened a clean page in my notebook. At the top I wrote, "Packing list, Maine." Underneath I scribbled, "Journal, hiking shoes, scarf from Nora, a sketchbook, that blue sweater I forgot I loved, camera for me, not for proof." It was just a list. But it felt like a blueprint. Not for escape, but for expansion. And for the first time in a long time, when I thought about the future, I didn't feel anxious or small. I felt possible. The suitcase sat open at the foot of my bed, half-packed. A couple of sweaters, my sketchbook, a second-hand wool coat I found on sale, and the soft leather shoes I'd worn only once, waiting for the right moment. Maine was 3 days away. I hadn't told anyone, not because it was a secret, but because there was no one left who needed to know. Not out of bitterness. Just clarity. I no longer filled the silence with justifications or apologies. It was quiet in my life now, not because people weren't calling, but because I had chosen not to answer. The absence wasn't a void anymore. It was space. That morning, I sat by the window with a bowl of oatmeal and watched the city wake up. My rosemary plant had grown bushier, the leaves stretching up toward the sunlight like they too were learning to breathe. I thought about everything I used to give without thinking. The dinners, the deposits, problem solving, the emotional glue I applied to hold together a family that never stopped asking but rarely gave. Now I gave to myself. Slowly, gently, time, rest, choice. Through breakfast, I pulled out the envelope I had kept taped behind the spreadsheet on my wall. The one that read, "For reference only." I unfolded the paper, smoothed it out. The numbers were still there, $18 for 0217. A monument of receipts, charges, quiet sacrifices. A year's worth of self-erasure neatly catalogued. I stared at it for a moment, not with regret, but with reverence. Then I folded it again, slid it into a drawer. It had served its purpose. That afternoon, I opened a new group chat, not with my family but with the people who had quietly become my circle. Nora, who always asked how I felt, not what I could do. Lena, who gave me a place to land when I didn't know how to ask. Gerald, who argued passionately over chili and brought the good napkins. I typed, "Trip coming up. Maine. Just me. If I come back with a lobsterman boyfriend, act surprised." The replies came fast and loud. "Only if you can cook. Bring back maple syrup or don't come back. Proud of you always." I smiled and closed the app. That was all I needed. That night, I packed the last few items. A pen, a book, a scarf from Nora, and one last thing, a note I'd written weeks ago but never deleted. A promise to myself. I will not apologize for needing peace. I will not explain the boundaries that keep me whole. I folded the paper and tucked it into the side pocket of my suitcase. Not for anyone else. Just for me. The morning of the flight, I locked the door behind me and felt no pull to look back. No guilt. No weight. Only breath. As I stepped into the taxi, the sky above was clear, wide, and blue. For once, the horizon didn't look like something I had to earn. It looked like something waiting with open arms. And as the plane lifted, taking me farther from the place I once lived and closer to the life I now chose, I whispered one final truth into the cabin air. Peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It's the quiet that stays. When everything else is gone. And it was enough. More than enough.